Hello, everybody. Can you all hear me okay? Can I ask those of you who are coming in to take your seats, if that's okay? And we'll get started with this European Greens Congress. So I'd like to welcome you all to Dublin. So a big round of applause to everybody for making it here and for coming all this way. And I think we're going to have a very interesting couple of days here. I know a few of you have been here for a couple of days already, so I hope you're enjoying our Dublin hospitality, and there's more to come. And we're delighted that the European Greens decided to have this Congress here in Dublin. So thank you very much to everybody. So I'll just introduce myself for a moment. So my name is Christina Kiley, and I am the National Coordinator of the Green Party here in Ireland. So that means that I'm the chair of the National Executive. For the past number of years, for the past 5 years, I've been heavily involved in the party. I've worked in Leinster House with one of our TDs, our members of Parliament, Marco Kohasik, who'll be speaking here later today. I've also been a Green Party councillor on Waterford City and County Council, and I'm a former deputy mayor of the Waterford metropolitan area. And I'm going to be your MC, or Master of Ceremonies, for the weekend. So, thank you. So I suppose, like a lot of you here, you know, I've come to this place, I suppose, from a point of environmental activism. I'm a former Greenpeace activist, and I say that I swapped my Greenpeace life jacket for a suit jacket, because this is how I do my activism now. But I suppose as well, like a lot of you, I've a number of very particular reasons for being here. I have 4 reasons in particular, and their names are Connor, Roisin, Cian and Oisin. They're my 4 children, and that's why I do what I do, and that's what I've done for over 30 years now, since before they were even born, or before I even had thoughts of children. I'm now doing this for my future grandchildren, though my older children don't want to hear that word just yet, as you can imagine. So look at, I just want to say a big hello to the audience who are following us online. We have a live stream going out, so we have a good audience online, so hello to everybody there. And I'm just going to invite anyone who's in the lobby outside to stay coming in, because we're going to kick off in the next couple of minutes. Now, just a little bit of housekeeping for you all. While we're here, just a few details. I'm just going to ask you all if you continue to wear your lanyards, your badges, for the weekend. And it's already shared via email to all of you, but there are 2 channels of communication that are going to be ongoing during the... Here we go. Yes, I turned around for a moment, hoping they'd be on the screen behind me. So you can scan these 2 QR codes. There are signs out in the lobby as well, so you'll see them out in the lobby, and they'll link you into either the WhatsApp group or the Signal group, just for any last-minute changes, any last-minute updates, or any changes to the programme over the weekend. And also, you can see the hashtags are up there, and all of the socials. So we ask that you use the hashtags if you're sharing on social media. And there's also, I'm not sure if the logo is up there, but there'll also be a Flickr feed as well. And we'd ask that if you are using any of the photos from Flickr, that you credit the photographer, and their name will be with the photos. And another little bit of housekeeping, there is a safety team. So we have some posters around the venue with details of the safety officers. There are 4 people on site. We have their pictures around them, so you'll be able to recognise them, contact details, and they're wearing orange lanyards. So if you have any issues that you need to reach out to one of those, you'll be able to find them easily enough. But before we kick things off with the official opening and our great speakers, we need to get a small but very important formality out of the way. So for this, I invite up Benedetta Del Marte, the Secretary General of the European Greens, on stage. Welcome, Benedetta. Thank you very
Yes, hi everyone. I didn't know where to go up. That's why I was hesitating a bit. So yes, we have a very small procedural thing to do, which is to all agree on the postponement of the deadline for the candidacies to become a committee member. As you might remember, back in September, we had a deadline that we, when the procedure started, considered a little bit too short. And so we sent an email to all the delegates to ask if they had objections to whether the deadline would be postponed. Nobody answered, so we gathered that there was no objection, but now we just need to formalize with a show of hand or with an applause or with whatever that we accept all the candidacies that came after the deadline. So 2 weeks later, it was the time of the postponement. So if you can please give a strong applause to all the great candidates that have decided to run for the committee, we can close this little procedural thing. Thank you very much, and then I give you back the floor, my dear. You were also not ready, I was too quick.
Thank you very much, Benedetta. Okay, so it's all about the housekeeping for these few minutes, just until we get fully up and running. So I think most people who are here now, I know there are some more people still to come, but I think most people here have taken their seats. So I'm just going to run through the first block of the program. The official opening is going to be done by 3 people. So we're going to have Melanie and Thomas, our co-chairs, and Roderick O'Gorman, who's the leader of the Irish Green Party on Coenthus Loss. So they're going to take to the stage in a few moments, and the opening will continue with our keynote speaker, Minister Eamon Ryan from the Irish Greens as well. So I'm just going to invite Melanie and Thomas and Roderick up to the stage. That's okay?
Everybody, and thank you, Christina. And I would like to start by welcoming all the delegates to Ireland and welcome to our capital city, Dublin. And I hope you have a productive Congress, and I also hope you have a really enjoyable time in Dublin over the next number of days. And this is the first time that Dublin has hosted the European Greens Congress for 20 years. And I think it's fair to say that the global green movement has seen significant change in that period of time. And I know the last time we gathered here in Dublin, it was a much smaller affair. And I think it's really heartening to reflect on the growth that environmental politics has seen across that time, as is demonstrated by the scale of our meeting here today. Look, I think many of you are aware that you join us at a difficult time for the Irish Green Party. After 4 years in government, we sustained heavy losses in last weekend's general election. And this is a real blow to progressive politics here in Ireland. And on a personal level, it's very hard to see friends miss out on re-election despite their hard work. And I would like to take this opportunity to pay tribute to all the outgoing TDs and all our candidates who ran for the Green Party for their work for the country over the last number of years. Thank you. And I would also like to recognise the huge work that our staff has done in supporting us over that period of time. And while last weekend's results were undoubtedly a great disappointment, we knew when we went into politics that it was to make change, and it was to implement the measures that our planet needs. And more than any other party, we know that we do not have the luxury of opposition. The climate crisis, the biodiversity crisis, they demand action and they demand bravery. And it was on that basis that the Green Party went into a coalition government 4 years ago. And through very difficult circumstances, the COVID-19 crisis, the war in Ukraine, a cost of living crisis, we as a party, we delivered in government. Ireland, for years, had been a climate laggard. We were a rich country that consistently failed to play its part in tackling climate change. And that changed when the Green Party went into government. Within the first 100 days, we introduced a new Climate Change Act, committing all future governments to legally binding emissions reduction targets. We massively increased investment in public transport. We got major projects off the ground, we reduced fares, and we've made public transport free for young children. We've instigated a solar power revolution. We've expanded retrofits for homes and businesses across the country, starting with the homes of people who have low incomes. We presided over a tripling of the land area that was being farmed organically. We introduced a deposit return scheme, and we created 2 new national parks to help protect biodiversity. But most importantly, most central to our mission as Greens, I'm proud to say after many years of our carbon emissions growing year on year, in 2023, Ireland's emissions fell by almost 7%, and our emissions are now the lowest that they've been in 30 years. So whatever about those election results, we did what we said we would do when we went into government. We've turned that climate ship around, and even in these very difficult days for everybody in our party, this is something that we are hugely proud of. And colleagues, I would be remiss if I didn't pay tribute to one particular person, and that's my colleague, Eamon Ryan. And as many of you will know, Eamon was the leader of our party from 2011 up until earlier this year. And that was at a time, particularly in 2020, when we lost all our seats, when we lost our state funding. And Eamon worked doggedly across that period to rebuild our party with volunteers, with a small skeleton staff. We won 2 seats in 2016, and we grew that to 12 seats in 2020. And in 2020, he skillfully oversaw the negotiation of a programme for government, one that brought about the changes that I've outlined to you already. And when it comes to the environment, Eamon has been a key driver behind the changes that we've implemented over the last number of years. And he's continued that work at an international level. He played a very important role in the COP climate negotiations in Baku in the last number of weeks. And in my opinion, Eamon will be seen as one of Ireland's most transformational ministers, and I'd like to take this opportunity to thank him for his dedication over the years. And I recognise that 2024 has been a difficult year for others in the Green family across Europe. And from that real high point in 2019, 2020, that wave that came in, it can sometimes feel that in this year of elections, that wave is now going out. In the European Parliament, we saw the loss of some seats, and we know that when the issues of climate, when the issues of biodiversity are more apparent and more urgent than ever, this is a profound challenge for all of us. And so too is the rise of extremist politics and the far right. And not only do they promote denialism, promote populism on climate action, but they also attack the freedom, they attack the social progress that Europe has made over the past number of decades. And those of us in the Green family understand perhaps more than anyone that the challenges we face, they're both interlinked and they're global. And small-minded isolationism, nativism, that cannot begin to address those challenges. And the rise of the far right and the need for sustained climate action addressing biodiversity loss, we must face those challenges together. And it's from that cooperation, it's from that solidarity that we can take strength. And I think back to that last Green Party Congress in Dublin 2 decades ago, and I'm reminded of how far we have come as a movement across Europe. What was then considered a fringe movement is now very much the mainstream, very much the center of European politics. And while their actions may not go far enough and they may not be fast enough, many other political parties are increasingly acknowledging that need for climate action. And as Green parties, it's our role to make it clear that there can be no stepping back from climate action. There can be no half measures. The threat is here and it's now. We see that in the extreme weather events, both in Europe and across the globe. And we know that this year is likely to be the hottest year on record. It's clearer now than ever before that our climate is changing. And what is a challenge for us as Greens is to make the case in a way that brings people with us and makes it clear that the risk that climate change poses, but also make clear the opportunities that exist as well. And as Greens, it's not just about climate, but it is also about that wider vision, a vision of a fair, inclusive, and just society. And also as Greens in government, we have that obligation to show people that we will help them make the changes that this challenge demands of all of us. Our program over this weekend seeks to discuss many of the most pressing issues that we face: fighting the far right, the Green New Deal at a local level, and the green transition. There's so much that we can learn from each other, and I've no doubt that this weekend's discussions are going to be informative and they're going to be inspirational. Over the weekend, when speaking to the media about our election results, I was asked what they mean for the Green Party here in Ireland. And my message to them was very clear. Our issues are not going away, and the Green Party is not going away either. And even in what has been a difficult year, there are signs of hope across Europe. Greens are prospering in Central and Eastern Europe. The Progressives in Latvia, Lithuania's Democrats, recent wins in Croatia and in Slovenia. And in the recent UK election, the Green Party of England and Wales increased its representation from 1 to 4 seats, winning in urban and rural areas and winning in first-past-the-post constituencies, which we know are so difficult for small parties like ourselves. So while there have been difficult days, there have been setbacks, there is very clear signs of hope that we can build on. And the Green Party in Ireland, like many across Europe, our roots are in a form of deliberative and a form of participatory decision-making. We're stronger from having discussed and debated the issues facing us, and I certainly hope that will be the case over the coming days, that we all have a lot to discuss. And I want to finish by once again thanking you all for coming to Dublin. I hope you have a wonderful time in our fantastic city, and I look forward to meeting as many of you as I can over the next number of days. Thank you all. Thank you.
Well done, well done. So good day, everybody. Welcome to this EGP Congress here in Dublin. You know, I'm a nightmare for all the comms people. They were asking me, what's my speech beforehand? There's no speech as such, as just some notes that keep me on track. So sorry for that, guys, because we have a fantastic comms team in EGP, but sorry for that, guys. I will try to get better in another career. So yes, what an intensive year we had. What an intensive year. I mean, Lyon seems to be a decade ago. I don't know how you feel about it, but it's like so much happened since then. I mean, I would never be able, within 8 minutes, to summarize all of this. Yeah? But you know, yeah, you mentioned already elections. Yeah, we had EU elections. Yes, it was a mixed picture. Yeah, we had gains in many areas of the European Union, enlarging to the south, to the east. We had also defeats in some of our core countries, like France or Germany. But I mean, look at France, you know. I mean, that's how we Greens are, you know. We're knocked down on our knees, and what? 2 months later, 3 months later, they're back, and the French Greens have the most MPs in the national parliament ever. And this is what we Greens are. I mean, you know. Or you mentioned UK also, but let me just add one thing. This was a landslide victory of Labour. And we often think, okay, if Labour, if other progressive party gets the votes, it's going to get difficult for us. It's not such a thing in the UK. It was a landslide victory for Labour, and still the Greens, as you said, quadrupled their members in the parliament. So let's not, yes, I mean, it's worth an applause. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. But we also have to acknowledge, I mean, far-right parties, extreme right parties, extreme far-right parties, post-fascist parties, I mean, they have gained a lot of votes. And in some countries, they're even using narratives, they're using words from Nazi rhetoric without shame, putting them on posters on the streets. And this is what we also witness within the European Union. And I mean, we have to take a look as Green Movement and how comes and what is motivating voters to actually go down that path. And we have to acknowledge that there's a lot of insecurity around. There's a lot of insecurity due to the effects of climate crisis. I mean, we all feel it, we all see it. I mean, the floods in Valencia, we had floods in Austria, Hungary, Czech Republic, we had droughts in Bulgaria, in Romania, actually in the whole south of Europe. Before the floods came, there was a drought. So massive impact of climate change. I mean, it's creating insecurity. Also, I mean, we're having a massive war on European soil. We're having Russia still trying to destroy Ukraine. We have Russia turning over the whole peace order of post-Second World War, coming back to the power of strongest. I can, so I take. And this is creating insecurity, and rightly so, it's creating insecurity. We had multiple crises. We had a cost of living crisis where people, many of our fellow citizens, don't manage with their monthly income anymore. We have a housing crisis. So it's multiple crises that create a lot of insecurity. And then we have foreign influence from authoritarian regimes, unfortunately more and more kind of popping up across the globe. Massive foreign influence, as you've seen in Romania just lately. 60,000 TikTok accounts that appeared within days, spreading millions of posts. And it's still not clarified where they're coming from, who was paying for this. So massive foreign influence from authoritarian regimes to actually try to destroy our liberal democracies. That's what we're witnessing today. And also this creates a lot of insecurity. And we have massive agitation on far right trying to capitalize and unfortunately managing to capitalize on these frames. But what's our role in this? I think our duty is to counter that with positive narratives, with positive visions, where we show how it's possible to create cities that have clean air and little noise, to create cities that are inclusive, you know, where it doesn't matter what the color of your skin is, what your origin is, or what your abilities are. Cities that provide all our citizens with decent housing. This is visions that we can also promote. And it's more than visions. I mean, we have so many mayors around the European Union and Europe where we can show how this actually looks like. Or positive visions of a non-violent world. The principle of non-violence, of returning to a peace order, of good neighborly relations, of compromising with each other. I think this is something we need to advocate for strongly. A green industry, you know, that is based on renewable energy, that is based on circularity, that pays decent wages. This is a world that is possible. And it's our duty to advocate for that, to promote that, and to convince voters that it's worth going a bit of the path with us and give us their vote to create a proper future for next generations. And I think this is also one of the learnings we need to draw from this year of elections across the European Union. And why are we most and best settled to do that? Because we as Greens, we're based on a very strong common set of values. A common set of values that unites all of us. Even though we might have different opinions, different angles, different priorities, we use a different language here or there. But it's the common set of values that keeps us together here in European Green Party, same in European Parliament, actually globally with the Global Greens. And this common set of values is what makes us strong and what lets us also survive or manage also times of crisis and multiple crises, what also lets us manage the one or the other defeat that we will see again and again, because, I mean, we're mingling with very powerful people, you know, once again and again. I mean, you know, we're trying to stop fossil industry. I mean, okay, you know who we are confronting here with reality. So this set of common values, I think we should never forget that this is what is our basis. And so we will sort out, and I hope, and I'm confident that we will sort out our different approaches also this weekend based on these common values, because we have a responsibility. We have a responsibility from the millions of voters that have given us their vote for a certain time, that have lended us their vote. And our responsibility is to make this planet, these cities, our countries, a better place for today and for the future. And that's what we're here for, and that's what we're going to work on, and that's what we're united on. Let's do it. Let's make it happen. Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. It's usually pretty easy for me to give speeches. Sometimes I can even enjoy it. But I have to say that this one, I think, is going to be by far the most difficult speech I'm going to give. And I'm going to try to give it without crying. It's the last time I will address you as a co-chair of this organization, but it's also a very tough moment for us Greens, but I think more widely for every one of us who fights for an open, free, and democratic society. The last time we met was in Lyon during our electoral congress, where we kicked off the campaign for the 2024 European elections. We were determined, strong-willed, and courageous. We went into this campaign together as a European united family, knowing that this was going to be the fight of our life, that everything we stand for, a green and social deal, European values, the perspective of a united Europe would be at stake. We marched into this campaign with a very clear message. Those who pit prosperity against the planet, who pretend that we must choose between solving the social crisis or the climate crisis, are the very ones responsible for both and wanting to solve none of them. We went into this campaign aiming at ensuring that the next European Parliament will be able to build pro-European, pro-climate majorities and at playing a central role in it. We went into this campaign with the goal of electing more MEPs for more countries, and by doing so, of enlarging our social bases in the continent and of growing as a family, diverse and united. And the truth is, we did not fail in all of this. We did not fully succeed either. We are left to deal for the years to come not with the black and white results, but with a nuanced and complex reality. And we can deal with it because if there is one thing Greens excel at, it's dealing with complexity. During this campaign, we managed to build a strong and credible offer, the Green and Social Deal. We managed to demonstrate that green policies can improve lives and protect livelihoods, and that the Green Project is the only credible path towards social justice. We did manage to elect MEPs from more EU countries than ever before. The Greens are now much better represented in Southern and Eastern Europe, and this strengthens and enriches us in the long run. We managed to build strong allies in the civil society. We are the only European political party that gathers hundreds of experts, green businesses, NGOs, and trade unions to co-build our manifesto. But we are a smaller group in the European Parliament. Breakthrough in many countries could not compensate for big losses in others. We are smaller and the far right is bigger. It's bigger in the EP, but it's bigger everywhere across Europe. And this leaves us with a challenging path. The vote on the European Commission, we all know, has not been an easy thing. With the deep and sincere conviction of doing the right thing, the Green MEPs have taken different decisions. And of course, this poses us a challenge as a European family, but this is a challenge we have all resources to tackle, because essentially, and I believe this is our strength since forever and forever, we may differ from time to time on the path we choose, but we are all united in our destination. None of us gave up the fight against the far right. None of us gave up constructiveness. We will always be radical. We will always be pragmatic. And that's what matters in the years to come. Because if there is one thing our stronger enemies want and would cherish so much, is seeing us divided. So we need to stay united, but we also need to keep up the work. Yes, we are facing a green backlash, like we are facing a feminist backlash. And yes, it is, and it will be difficult. But let us never forget one thing. Backlash is not a sign of failure. Backlash is an adverse reaction to progress. It is born from the victories that we have achieved. This is why we must absolutely resist despair. It is not a moment for resignation, friends. It's exactly the opposite. It's a moment for renewed determination. And the best strategy, I think, against the erosion of rights is the relentless pursuit of new rights. In Lyon, I remember I made a pledge to you. I told you the old white, conservative, cis, straight men in the French Senate are not going to have it their way this time. We're not going to give up, and with determination and with the strength of the feminist mobilization, we will put the right to abortion in the French Constitution. And we did. And it shows one thing. The reactionary forces are very strong, but the global feminist front is much stronger. And at the end, if we don't give up, we win. In the last 2-3 years, when I was working my ass off in achieving this, journalists were constantly asking me, but I mean, you see that it is not possible. Okay, it's not going to work. So why are you still optimistic? Are you optimistic? Do you have hope it's going to pass in the end? And I always said, no, I'm not optimistic, but at all. I'm not optimistic, I'm not pessimistic, and I have zero hope. I don't hope, I work. And I work because I just know that the worst is never certain and the best is always possible, and nobody is writing the story apart from us. That's what we need to keep in mind so badly during the years to come. The EU itself exists because some people on this continent refuse to give up. They lost at some time in history. But the mere possibility of rebuilding democracy and of imagining peace in Europe was rooted in the sole fact that some people endlessly continued to act against barbarism. Like some people like us, facing Orban, Trump, Putin, Milei, Wilders, Meloni or Le Pen, are going to endlessly act and stand by their values. The strongest successes are always impossible victories, but they're led by people like us who wonder less about why they can lose than about how they can win. So let's work on this, on how to win. And that leads me to the end of the speech. Having said all of this, why the fuck am I not running again? And I want you to know that this was so far the most difficult political decision I had to make in my life, and that I didn't take it because I didn't love being the co-chair of the European Green Party. I took it because I love it too much. Being the co-chair of the European Green Party has been the biggest honor of my life, the most beautiful responsibility I've ever been given, and the most enriching political but also personal experience. I had the privilege to be surrounded by wonderful, smart, dedicated people. Some are still there, some had to go after the election. I cannot name them all. Tom, Benny, the entire committee, our endless day calls about all types of problems to solve. The wonderful people that have been advising and assisting me, Julia, Mathilde, Kuba, the EGP staff, you have to know, they are incredible people. And I would like you to ask... Yeah, I wanted to ask you to applaud them. In the last years, I've given my entire life, my days, my nights, to our green project in France and in Europe. And after the election, somebody who I think is in the room wrote to me in a very nice message that it was very impressive, like the abortion in the constitution, the 3 campaigns in France, the campaign at EU level, the day-to-day mandate in the Senate, the day-to-day running of the EGP, the different personal challenges that occurred at the same time in my life, because I still kind of also had a life, that this was superhuman to still be standing. And he doesn't know it, but I thought about this a lot, and I'm not a superhuman. Superhuman don't exist. So the simple, normal human I am came to the conclusion that she had to make a choice. Given 150% of my life to 2 positions and being left with the constant feeling of never reaching 100% in each of them, or dedicating fully to one and achieving more. And I'm still a woman. It's too hard to confidently choose underperformance. So when I took the... Sorry. When I took this decision, I didn't know that, it was going to be formalized at a moment where it would be so right. As you know, on Wednesday, the French government fell. It fell because of Macron's attempts to place the country in the hand of the far right, against voters' will, but also against our constitutional value. Like in the European Parliament, like in so many countries in Europe, the center-right in France has a decision to make and an answer to give to history. Do they hate climate investment and tax justice more or less than fascism? That's basically the question they have to answer. And to get them coming back to sanity and decency, to take our responsibility for when they do so, I think the French Greens have a historical role to play. And I believe I must play an active role in this. Like I believe that the EGP needs and deserves people who can put even more time and more energy in this than I will be able to. But I'm not going far away. When I was elected in Riga, I told you that by being elected in the French Senate, I was not becoming a French politician, but a European politician doing politics in France. And I want you to know that this will always, always be the case. I'm not choosing France over Europe. I mean, who would do such a thing? I'm choosing to be where I think I'm the most useful for our common European fight in favor of a green, social, democratic, and feminist future. I'm doing what somebody who loves being the EGP co-chair should do. I'm still an okay French. I will be, first and foremost, a committed European, because I'm a Democrat, I'm a feminist, because I want social justice, because I want peace, because I'm a green. I am European, and the EGP will always be my family. And I want to end by telling the next leadership that they have my full trust and my full support, and that they will always be able to count on me whenever they deem it useful. And that for this difficult time, these difficult, challenging years to come, with strength and commitment, and also with the joy and kindness that defines us as a European political family, I will stand by you. Have a nice Congress. Thank you very much.
Back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Roderick, Thomas, and Melanie, for your very, very heartfelt words. As you all know, it's been a tough week for us here in Ireland, but I suppose listening to our previous 3 speakers who officially opened the Congress, it's a really great sign of the passion and the dedication that everyone puts into fighting for the green message. And I was frantically taking notes as Melanie, as you were speaking, and I will hold on to backlash is an adverse reaction to progress. I will be using that again. And if we don't give up, we win. Copyright free, so I think that means everyone else can use it as well. And I think, Melanie, your words about working day and night resonates with an awful lot of people in this room. I think this is a room full of absolutely incredible passion and dedication for the green message right across Europe. So I'm just going to move on. And on the subject of passion and dedication, I'm going to come to introduce our keynote speaker, Eamon Ryan, Minister for Climate, Environment, Communications, and Minister for Transport in Ireland. Now, they're two separate ministries. It's not just one big ministry, they're two entirely separate ministries. It's been the honour of my life to work in a team that was led by Eamon over the last 4.5 years before Roderick took over when Raymond stepped down as leader of the party a few months ago. And as Roderick said, Eamon led the European delegation at COP in the loss and damage negotiations last year, and this year led the UN delegation on climate finance. So, and that's all entirely separate to the phenomenal work that he has done here at home in terms of climate action in the Irish Parliament. So I won't go into the details on that. I'll leave him. Let me welcome to the stage Minister Eamon Ryan.
Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to talk afterwards, I think, about Ireland a bit more, but I want, if I can, just to share a few thoughts, maybe more internationally. And our involvement with the European Green Party over the last 45 years now or so. Maybe start at home, though. The green movement, green political thinking, green philosophy. Where does it come from? And it comes, I was very lucky in COP recently in Baku. I met Chloe Swarbrick, the head of the New Zealand Green Party. And it was like meeting, I don't know if you ever met a cousin who you've never met before. Straight away, we were chatting in the exact same language. I know we both speak English, but you know what I mean? We knew exactly what we were talking about and sharing kind of perspectives as to what's happening. And there's that green perspective all over the world, in every country. The leader of the Irish, first founder, we didn't have a leader until very recently, but our founder, Christopher Fettis, who put an ad in the newspaper back in the early 80s, told me he actually, some of his thinking came from what some people see as the first Green Party. It was the Values Party based in New Zealand. It wasn't comfortable with, it was on the left, but not comfortable with some of the hard Marxist-Leninist kind of view, or the complacent Labour view at the time. It was said that it was looking for a more alternative rather than oppositional, for its own sake, perspective. I had the great joy of meeting another Antipodean, Christine Milne, who was one of the first founders of the Tasmanian Green Party. They actually hold claim to being the first Green Party. It's slightly disputed. They were influenced by what had happened across the Tasman in Wellington in New Zealand, and they were protecting a beautiful lake in Tasmania, which was threatened by the construction of a dam and extraction of industries. And I'll always remember, and I always repeat, it bears repeating, what those founding values, as Christine perceived, and I think it's what cousins in this political philosophy do share, the four characteristics that we have. The ecological imperative. We are in an ecological crisis that threatens us all. The fact that social justice has to come in the transition as you address that. That we believe in peaceful politics and also in democratic constitutional approach. I want to just maybe tease out some of those as I see it as I've seen it lived out in this, our European Green Party, in the 35, 40 years that I've been involved. First, to go back to that first source, that period, and maybe going back locally here, we were born out of that evolutionary leap, it seems, that took place in the 60s, early 70s. Joseph Beuys gave a lecture up the road here in the Hugh Lane Municipal Gallery of Art. And what did he call it? A blueprint for being, which was actually inspired by some Celtic art, or maybe just this perspective we have on the western edge of Europe, on the cutting edge of Europe, out in the Atlantic, about to be hit by Storm Dara. He went down and planted 7,000 trees in Ishnok, the fifth province we have, rarely talked about, which was a place where you meet to settle differences in a respectful way, where you listen, where you understand another perspective, but you also present what you believe in. I think that movement, that original movement, which inspired then the establishment of the Green Party, Christine Milne said that what happened was it grew in Tasmania and then migrated across into Sydney, where the trade unions and others were involved in protecting green spaces in the city. They wore green bands to signal their protest against the destruction of the green spaces. Petra Kelly happened to be in Sydney at the time and brought home that green band and that idea that we would call ourselves green and reflect these values, which were common, which were popping up that stage, the late 70s, early 80s, all over the world. Petra Kelly came here. I'm old enough, long enough involved in our party to remember meeting her here. She came on several occasions in that period in the early and mid-80s. The ecological imperative we might talk about later, but just briefly, one thought on the social justice aspect of it, which always seems to me, because we are of the left, we come from that perspective that you can't have ecological justice without social justice. But also increasingly in working, as we all do, in delivering the real change, it seems increasingly clear to me that the ecological solutions tend towards the socially just. When you're promoting public transport, it's not just it's more efficient or lower emissions. It's a collective communal experience. Stepping off a Dublin bus where you say thank you to the driver, as we do, and when you have that sense of common experience, and you could go right through, in my mind, all the key policy areas that we have to affect change, that by nature, it brings social justice in its step. It also has to be peaceful politics. And yes, that wasn't just the establishment of our party in those days of CND and anti-militarist, anti-colonialist. It is also, what was the quote from Petra Kelly? Peace is not just the absence of mass destruction, but a positive internal and external condition in which people are free so that they can grow to their full potential. And I think taking an alternative rather than just oppositional politics, when you have that freedom to fulfill yourself, it tends to bring, again, by nature, a respect for another, even if they're of a different political view. And I think that's an important tradition, quality, value within our political philosophy that we need to keep and to be true to. It is, though, more than anything else, or in the fourth value, that founding principle, as I would see it, it is a belief in democratic constitutional politics to achieve this environment, both personal as well as in nature, that we also adhere as cousins to a common view. Our democratic constitution here is what protects our rights, gives us the freedom to grow in that way. And we see the European Union as a further extension, and I would say further the United Nations and all the multilateral mechanisms that it brings as vital constitutional, the Declaration of Human Rights in the UN, all its various further iterations, the Sustainable Development Goals, you can see it in the Paris Climate Agreement, as well as our own European Union structures, is all part of that structure of democratic constitutional ways of delivering the ecological restoration, the social justice that we seek to bring. And in that, you can have tough days. You can lose your seats. But actually, being part of a democratic system which you really respect, including the judgment of the people, even if it may not be your day, you're restored by the votes that people give to you and by the prospect that you can come back, that you're privileged to operate within a constitutional democratic system. I always say to anyone running, I said, it's fantastic. It changes your mindset from they should do something to we should do something. Our European Union, I suppose, is also, as this European Party, is in my mind a magnificent expression of that. Coming out, actually, in that similar period, like earlier than the 60s and 70s, but was similarly founded on some of the post-war peace instincts that we saw develop in the European Union. I have been proud in the last 4.5 years, as well as those two departments, more than anything else, I've been proud to take my place on the European Council, both Environment and Energy Councils in particular. And the strength we have brought collectively as a European Green Party is beyond compare. The number of times I could cite or examples of a grandchild bouncing on my knee, please God, telling them, will I ever tell you the day that Leonora rescued the nature restoration law? Or would you ever hear the likes of Claude Turmes when it comes to grid development and all those issues? Or the strength that the fact that we delivered, and it was with other political parties and groupings, this is not exclusive, this is something that has to be shared, but that we in this moment of crisis, while a Congress could not agree in the US whether it was Tuesday or Wednesday, and where others take a more centralized, controlled approach, we agreed to democratic constitutional means to 25 pieces of legislation, the Fit for 55 legislation, that give us some hope that we can make the leap. And it was Robert and Leonora and Tina and all these brilliant politicians that we got elected for the Green Party, for the people, which allowed us to do that. That's been difficult in the last year or two because we all know that that tide has retreated. But we've seen the tide come in and come out. It came in that period in the late 60s, early 70s, in a radical rethink of what was possible through feminism, through gay rights, through CND, and not just environmental movement, all combined together, having a similar root. It went out. I'm old enough to remember in that late 70s, early 80s, in came Reagan and in came Thatcher, and it went out again. It came back in the late 80s. First election I ever ran in the late 80s, it was like picking apples from the bottom of the tree because the global consciousness had shifted and changed. It led to the signing of the Rio Agreement in 1992. It was a time when the German Green Party fundamentally changed the course of history by investing against any odds or against any economic analysis, against anything that you could possibly justify in a spreadsheet, but made a leap towards a renewable future that we now see coming, evolving before us because a small party in government was able to do something outrageous that changed the direction of the whole world. It went out again in the mid-90s. Tony Blair, Bill Clinton were all into the third way, which slightly lost its way, but it came back in the early 20s. Al Gore, An Inconvenient Truth. We all saw it, and our old parties around Europe started to gain. And if I think, and my God, we have got such benefit from our membership of the European Green Party over the years. Vula, Monica, Reinhardt, Rebecca Harms, Philippe Lambert, Ska. I remember back that time what we said there, Melanie, about we did well in the East in the elections, which we did, as well as in the North. The strength of that was sown 20 years previously, as I remember and recall, where we made a strategic decision to say we stand for every European, North, South, East, and West, and invested our collective resources, not just in money, but in actual heart, to deliver that result this year. It came from people, individuals, working collectively with that sort of 20-year vision. We start now small, and the returns come 2 decades later. The tide went out with the financial crash, 2008. My God, it went out here as low as anywhere, because we were centrally involved in the middle of it in government. I'm proud of the responsibility we took at that time. We did not run away. We're strong. And it came back in because, unfortunately, the reality of climate change has its center stage with Greta Thunberg and with David Attenborough and with the reality of the science starting to hit home. Outside the door here, I remember back in, must be 2018, one of our big climate strikes marches, and there were 30,000 people. We had a Laudato Si balloon, which was the size half the room. And the young people, the attitude was the thing that really inspired me. We are unstoppable. Another future is possible. It was alternative rather than oppositional. It was confident, full of fears, which we all have for what's happening. But as you say, Melanie, overcoming those fears by taking an action. And it's gone out since. The war in Ukraine, with COVID, what's happening in Gaza. And also, perhaps maybe the thing I worry about most is that young constituency may be thinking that there isn't hope, because that easy slogan of 6 years ago has not stopped the parts per million presence in the atmosphere of carbon, greenhouse gases increasing. Now, we have a tough situation in front of us. We'll come back here at home. I'm absolutely convinced of it. But we have an immediate job to do. This new European Commission, it's an interesting place. It seemed earlier this year that President von der Leyen and EPP view was maybe starting to dominate, where that Green New Deal is all very fine, but it's time to be serious now and grown up and go back to carbon. No, thank you. At the European Energy and Environmental Council the month before last, we were asked the simple question put by Mario Draghi in his paper and Enrico Letti's as to would our competitiveness be impacted by this decarbonisation? Is this really the right way to go? It didn't take long, no matter what your political persuasion, to realise that Europe's never going to be more competitive at burning fossil fuels from America or Kuwait or Saudi Arabia. How are we going to have an advantage in that, having to ship their waste fossil fuel products across the globe and burn them here? We are well placed, in my mind. There's a revolution, technological revolution taking hold in the clean energy, in digital, and the transport systems. And all three are interconnected. The digital revolution has to have clean energy, or else it's not sustainable. All the cloud-based services, all the AI is to no avail if we burn, because they're burning fossil fuels. So that they need clean. The clean energy also needs digital. Because what was started in that early 90s, German Greens-led renewable system, which is dominant now, it's 87% of the new generation in the world last year, it is taking off exponentially. There's tipping points to the good as well as to the bad. But it needs balancing capability to switch everything on and off, to use this incredible power that comes from the heavens, not from hell, as Bill McKibben says. And that needs digital. Really clever, connected, distributed network nodal system. Transport's the same. It's happening. It has to be electrified in everything, so it needs the clean. But to do that, and with all the transport-based services, it too needs digital. Who's going to be good at regulating or promoting or fostering these new revolutions? They are different systems to what's gone before. They're by definition, by nature, distributed network nodal systems. Not centralized, not hierarchical, flatter. What political philosophy is best placed to understand complex network living systems? It's an ecological perspective. In my mind, based particularly on democratic constitutional values, where you have a system like we have in the European Union that can actually come together, all 27 of us, even in difficult times, to agree how we do that. So to those MEPs going into this next mandate, you have a huge responsibility, you have a historic role that we wish you well and we will support you in all our might and main, because we now have to deliver quicker. Spectacularly difficult challenge. What the scientists said at our European Council in June is that we have 200 gigatons of carbon we can still emit to keep below 1.5. We're over 1.5, but to get back. And there's something like 40 gigatons a year going out. We're into a 10% per annum reduction, which we all know, having been involved in office, is really hard to achieve. It's beyond compare a challenge. Kieran Cuff is always saying to me, rightly said, never use military metaphors, because that's not in tune with our peace origins. But Kieran, I've broken free. I'm afraid I'm away. I can only look at this now as a wartime type situation where we are incredibly challenged. There are battles every day. There are skirmishes and battles. And we will not win every one of them. But nor will we lose every one of them. I sometimes think our environmental movement, our cousins in the environmental movement, sometimes call everything a defeat, when actually we may have won the day. But that's the way we have to see it now. We go out to battle for this utterly, incredibly important transition to protect our people and deliver social justice in its wake. We count on our European Green colleagues. We get strength from you. And we will be there to play our part. On the western cutting edge of Europe, yes, hit by electoral challenges, but my God, as you're about to hear, we also have one great story to tell, that you can deliver change. You can be true to your values and the principles, and in politics, do something that makes you proud, addresses the fear, by taking action in every way. Up the Green Party. Come on, Europe. Let's do it together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eamon. We're going to have a panel discussion in a couple of minutes, and Eamon is going to stay on to be part of that. As we've referred to a couple of times, we've had a bit of a sad week here. And after our results last weekend, as they were coming through, there was an awful lot of talk about percentages of the votes and percentages in different constituencies. And as I said to a number of people on Saturday, there was only one percentage that actually mattered, and that was the 6.8% reduction in emissions that Ireland achieved in 2023, thanks to the Greens being in government here. That's the level. Our emissions are now down to what they were in 1990, which is the last time Ireland played in the World Cup, and which is 34 years ago. But what you've just seen here now from Eamon is a sample of the leadership that got us to that and got us to that amazing reduction. And before I invite our other panellists up onto the stage, we're just going to go to a short video. It's a parliamentary party broadcast from some of the rest of our members of our parliamentary party and more of the team who got us to that reduction in emissions. Thank you.
All over Ireland demanded practical action to stop climate change. We entered government to turn those demands into reality. Today, every single person in Ireland is taking action to protect our environment, and there are many signs of success. Every day, more than 100,000 homes are getting cheap, clean electricity from solar panels on their roofs. Every day, a record 1 million people are using cheaper public transport. Every day, millions of plastic bottles and cans are being returned and recycled. Together, we are hitting targets that people said were impossible, but we've just begun. Our country has laid the groundwork for a wind energy revolution that will finally end our dependency on imported fossil fuels. This is an important election. No other party has the energy needed for real climate action. If the Green Party is not part of the next government, we will go backwards exactly when we need to move forwards.
So now I'd like to invite Marco Kohasik and Pauline O'Reilly to the stage, please, and you can take your seats. So Mark has spent the last 4.5 years as a TD, member of the Irish Parliament, representing the constituency of Waterford, and he was also the Assistant Government Whip, and luckily for him, also my boss for those few years. And Pauline dodged that particular last bullet. Senator Pauline O'Reilly, and Pauline is from Galway, and she's also the chairperson of the Green Party. So thank you for joining us, guys. So, okay, I'm just going to get organized here. So I'm going to keep this very, very simple. I'm just going to talk to the three of you and ask you for, start with your reflections over the last 5 years. So Mark or Pauline, I'm going to go to one of you first. Who wants to go first?
Is this on?
Yeah.
Yeah, you hearing me?
Yeah.
Eamon and Pauline will know I'm partial to a Shakespeare quote every now and again. And the entire time that we were in government, I had a quote from Julius Caesar in my head, which I won't give the full quote, but it says, "There's a tide in the affairs of men which taken at its flood leads on to glory." And in 2020, we took advantage of a green tide, that 2019-2020, and it was all across Europe. And we had a decision to make in 2020, whether to pitch in and to be part of the next government, or to sit on the sidelines and to, I suppose, have a commentary on the failings of whatever government. We made the decision to get into government. I don't regret that for a second. We may have paid a heavy price for it, but as Eamon has said, Greens will come back. We're like seeds in the soil, it's what we do. But when you look at the outsized impact that we had on the last government, in terms of emissions reductions, in terms of, obviously Leonora did a very much a star turn on the nature restoration law, but Eamon and Minister Malcolm Noonan also played a key and critical role in the nature restoration law. And not just in that, I would say the thing that I am most proud of in the last government is that in coalition with two centre-right parties, we passed 5 progressive budgets. So not just those values around climate, environment, nature, but also our values around social justice were deeply ingrained into the fabric of this last government. So despite the fact that we've had quite the backlash, and I too will be remembering Melanie's words on backlash and where it comes from. It's quite inspiring to hear it. That was the right time for me to hear that quote, Melanie. I'm very content with the decision that we made in 2020, that we took the current when it served and made those changes that needed to happen.
Lovely. Thanks, Mark. Pauline, what about you?
Oh, I mean, it's been a blast, really, the last few years. It really has, and it's been such an honour. And obviously, you go through an exhausting election, and I suppose you're just decompressing. But my God, we were so lucky. I look around at the other TDs and senators who've never had the opportunities that we've had to really ramp things up and leave a lasting legacy. And I'm so incredibly proud of it. And if we hadn't done that much, we still would have lost our seats, and we wouldn't have, I suppose, left something for other people to step up to, you know, left a bar significantly higher than any bar had been set before in Irish politics. And I truly believe that is what we have done. Just massive, huge love for my colleagues. We've had a really good time together. We've achieved together, but we've also had to negotiate with people that we didn't agree with. And that made us improve and challenge ourselves. And I would say, along with the progressive budgets that Mark has mentioned, with the huge climate action and environmental action that you've seen here, I think there was also other things, like, for me, very much a move towards increasing our feminist, I suppose, legacy that we've left. We went into government at a time where people will remember we passed, a constitutional change in relation to abortion. But then beyond that, we have now put into the programme for government to get free contraception. I had done work around getting free HRT for women going through menopause, which is now coming to pass in January. And also we have significantly improved abortion access. And so all of that we leave behind us as well. And I do know that people will look back and they will be, they will, in the same way as Eamon stepping down as leader. I've never heard so many kind words about Eamon after you step down as leader. And it is, I think, in a few years' time, people will look back and say, here's the government that did all of this. And they'll be able to compare it to the current government that's going to go, or the government that's going to come, which is also a government of those two large parties, but without us. And let's see what the difference is. And then let's go to the people and say, here's your comparison. Here's your sliding doors moment. This was us in, this was us out. And now see what the difference is. But I absolutely agree with Mark. We had to step up. We did the right thing. We can sit back now and do whatever we're going to do and know that we did the right thing. And other parties are pointing to what happened to us in terms of our electoral lack of success and saying, this is why we're not going to go in because this is what happens. Well, that's the difference with the Green Party and other parties. We will always look to achieve and to take action, not just to sound good. And that's what I'm most proud of. I'm really proud of our party and delighted to be here. Even if we have one seat, it's still been worth it.
Thanks, Pauline. And I think that's been an overarching theme of the last week, pride about what's been achieved. And I suppose we're always conscious that the planet's on fire. And if you want to put out a fire, you walk towards the fire, you don't walk away from it. And that's very much what was done in 2020. Eamon, over to you for your reflections over the last 5 years.
I'm slightly nervous now that I could end up adding during the life of Brian, what did the Romans ever do for us? And we could then spend the next few years saying, what did the Greens ever do for us in government? Lower public transport, reducing fertiliser use, increasing renewable energy, and you could go on forward.
No, stay going. It's okay. Stay going.
No, yeah. Yeah, but do all that and then say, yeah, but how come the votes weren't there? And that's a really important question, particularly for our colleagues in Europe facing into elections coming up. I talked to Claude Termes, my mate, after the similar fate. No, they didn't quite as... Belgian, Austrian, and Luxembourg governments, Greens, didn't have as low, a bigger drop as us, but it's the same phenomenon. It's a global phenomenon. It's not... I was watching New Zealand and others where they've been really strong in opposition, and they're slightly trailing down. So there's a global consciousness tide going out that we were affected by, but we need to think further. What are the lessons we learned? What Claude said to me, and I think it's true, that we were subject to a fairly relentless attack. And while to a certain extent you get used to that and you brush it off, it does poison the well of the public thinking about you. And a lot of that online, I know not to overemphasize this too much, but it was quite phenomenal. I noticed about 3 or 4 years ago, I would post something and suddenly I would have 200 to 300 of the most bilious, vicious, derogatory attacks. And I can say, that's just organized, that's just bots, that's just whatever. But actually, I think it changes how the public see you. And I think not just that then, we had Ryanair going at it, me personally as well, like unrelentingly, unbelievable scale of abuse. And the Farmers Journal did the same. And not to, listen, we can put up with that. But the fear I have is that it does actually affect how people see us. And this is across other European countries too. And we do have to think, because if you just kick back and fight that, that's all you're doing. And you're not speaking to the people about what you do want to speak to. But at the same time, it is an issue. How do we address the unrelenting assault from vested interests or other political actors who see us as a threat and therefore really have attacked us? And we've seen that in spades in the last 4 years. Second lesson, I just think, which is a trickier one in a way, because we're at a stage of the ecological transition we need to make where it ain't just talking targets, it isn't just talking laws. We have to change things on the ground at scale and at speed. And change is, what did Woodrow Wilson say? If you want to make enemies, change things. It was weird canvassing out with Oisin in leafiest South Dublin. And we're putting cycle lanes. I mean, Jesus, who could not like a cycle lane? To get your kids to school safely, make a lovely local environment, and for a lot of people in a car-dominated society that we've created over 50 years of non-green thinking, actually, they see it as, that's one of the reasons why the traffic gridlock's getting worse, and you know this, and it really pissed people off. And that's just, again, for us as Greens across Europe and in the world, the scale of change we need to make is not small now. And it's heavy lifting stuff we need to do. And how we do that is a second issue, I think. Thirdly, and this is a trap, a trope that you can fall into, that it's really hard not to. The Greens talk down to people. They're not connected to rural Ireland. Like, it's not true. But it's such an easy trope. It's such an easy narrative. Like, I hold my hand up hard. I made mistakes. I've taken back my wolves comment at this stage because a lot of farmers read that, or in COVID, let's get growing, and people thinking that was. There were moments where you'd look back and say, oh, geez, I wish I hadn't said that. And it is really important, I think, in terms of my sense of how we're going to overcome that easy trope of us being superior and know-it-alls and slightly telling people what to do. You really have to absolutely pointedly counter that by asking people for help rather than telling them what to do, admitting uncertainties and speaking to the heart, but in a way that listening. And I think we did that, but it was really difficult, including our coalition colleagues. I mean, we worked very well together. We were lucky compared to, I see other coalitions across Europe. We had a really strong program for government, very green. And we had a basically good working relationship so that we were able to, that's the reason we were able to deliver, in fact, what we see as really fundamental change. But even our colleagues were very happily keeping that trope going. The Greens they're nice to work with, but they're also talking down to you. And that really hit us, that really hurt us. And I'm sure it's the same in other, I noticed talking to colleagues across Europe, those same subtle cultural indicators are the issues that are most concerned that we need to address as a political family right across Europe.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Eamon. And I suppose it hits on a lot of topics, around misinformation and disinformation. And, we'd often think, and maybe it's a thing we even tell our kids, that if there's, unpleasant comments online or whatever, that you don't give them oxygen. You're better to not give them oxygen. But then if you don't give them oxygen and you don't push back, they continue. So there's a fine line there, and I suppose part of the challenge is to find where that fine line is. I know my own 8-year-old was actually telling me that he was asking one of his classmates a couple of days before the election, who your parents going to vote for? And she didn't know, but she asked him who his were going to vote for. And he told them the Greens. And she said, oh, well, mine won't be voting for the Greens because they've made petrol dearer. And that's the only thing she knew about politics, was that the Greens had made petrol dearer. So, it's even an 8-year-old, she didn't read that online. She heard that at the kitchen table. So we've so much that we need to push back on. Pauline, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, just to say, I've spoken to many colleagues across Europe, and as Eamon says, there are similar experiences. I think we're all experiencing a lot of the same things. You know, for us in Ireland, it's dairy farmers. You know, you go to parts of Northern Europe and Scandinavia, it's forestry, for instance. There's those challenges that we all face, and it's as a collective we have to, I think how we're going to move forward. It's hard as a small party to battle against the narrative when the narrative is literally every other political party, because it suits those who are outside government to make sure that Labour and the Social Democrats will increase their votes because ours has decreased. We have independents that are looking for rural votes, and then we have our coalition colleagues. So it was everywhere. But I would say, you know, for me, I had a massive amount of abuse online, and it was predominantly from the US. And I think that, you know, I've been on Fox News, I've had Elon Musk, I've had JD Vance, everybody that you could imagine, you know, against you. And we are acting as a conduit for that, like anti-democratic, I suppose, global movement, and we're that conduit, and we're allowing it into our own democracies. I would say that's, you know, another thing to think about in all of this, because you can put up with personal abuse, but it's when you actually think it's impacting other people's right to choose based on facts who the right people to govern are. That's when it really, really bothers me. So, you know, I think there's a lot of work to be done, but it certainly has been our experience that it has hindered our election success.
Mark, do you want to come in on that? And then I'm going to ask the three of you for a quick highlight from the last few years.
Yeah, I'm firstly going to say we ran here in Ireland and the election on the tagline of Greens Deliver. And just for the European Greens arriving for the weekend, we've of course delivered you a huge Atlantic storm, which we're going to treat you to this evening. Real proper Irish weather coming in. And also we appear to be sitting on sheep. So I'm glad that we got a couple of good Irish stereotypes in. We know from some analysis that we've done here in Ireland, and I think it's true across Europe as well, that what people think of when they think of the Greens is not what we say, but what other people say about us. And I think one of the issues that we really have to face up to and counteract is that there are a lot of very powerful vested interests who are interested in painting a particular picture of the Greens. So, for example, petrol is more expensive. Now, we were unfortunate in that. That narrative was there, we came into power, and Putin invaded Ukraine. So people, I suppose, in a sense, knew that the Greens hadn't made petrol more expensive, but intuitively, they went to the petrol pump. The petrol was a lot more expensive. I don't think that played to us. But who's interested in perpetuating that narrative? The fossil fuel industry. Similarly, the idea that Greens are anti-farming. I find this particularly difficult to take. You'd understand that if you saw the road that I come from, which literally has grass down the middle. So people tell me I'm anti-rural Ireland when I'm from rural Ireland. But who's interested in portraying me in that way? And it's not even a farming lobby, really. It's actually people who sell things to the farmers. They're interested in perpetuating this. Or the people who control social media. They're also interested in attacking people who are defenders of democratic values, because the current owners of social media, or the people who are spending large sums of money on social media to influence opinion, they're not interested in those values of democracy. So these are big tides, these are big mega trends that we have to push back on. But push back on we have to, because our message and the importance of our mission has never been clear.
Yep, thank you very much for that, Mark. Hitting the nail on the head, I think. Before we finish up, I'm just going to come to you in order. I'm going to come Eamon, Pauline and Mark for one quick highlight from the last few years. So Eamon, do you have a quick highlight from the last couple of years, from the last few years?
The highlight arrived last weekend when Roderick O'Gorman was elected, I'll be honest. I think that was so important for us. I cannot underestimate, because I've been there, as you were saying earlier, like we lost all our seats in 2011, similar time, tough time in government, and then we had to build up with nothing. We had no money. We had We had 2 councillors, and we did it. Now we've 25 councillors, and we have Oireachtas representation. Please God, we get some senators as well. And that's a completely different ball game, because we now go into the next Dáil, the next Parliament, able to ask questions of every minister, put amendments to every bill, raise motions and be engaged in national politics in a way that we weren't between 2011 and 2016. And we do so as a party that is incredibly experienced in how our state works, in knowing where the bodies are buried in the government departments, in knowing what needs to be done, I think. And so when Roderick got elected, well, it was tough because we'd lost so many previously, but that, to my mind, the build back had already started. When he got elected, and Roderick's so capable, that moment, I said, we're coming back strong here.
And Pauline, for you, a highlight?
It's hard to pick one, Christine. I've heard the long list of things that that have been achieved over the last few years. I suppose the highlights are really working together. Those moments when, you know, it's late nights, it's midnight, and you're trying to get something over the line that nobody will ever see. And I got a message from somebody in the environmental NGO sector to say, I just want to thank you, Pauline, for all your work on this particular bill that we passed. Nobody will ever recognise the work that you do in the background. And actually, it's those kind of quiet moments that I get the most pleasure from, because we all stand up and we speak with great gusto, but actually it's the work that matters. It's leaving the legacy for my children and everybody else's children. It's why I went into politics. And in a really short period of time, I feel like I've played my part, not just in the pieces of legislation that I got over the line, but holding a party together was really my mission, to hold the party together so that Eamon and Roderick and the other ministers could do their jobs. And so I feel like I've played my part, and I feel proud now that we have Roderick in there. And I think the other important thing about Roderick's department was right in the centre of the storm in relation to immigration. And that's the TD that we got over the line. I think that sends a really strong message to the far right. Stand back. We've got this. And they didn't get people over the line. So that's something to be really proud of. Proud of Roderick's work, proud of Eamon's work and all of the ministers, and proud of the small parts that the rest of us have played.
And Mark, a highlight from you?
Yeah, so I started with Shakespeare. I'll go back to him. Different play this time. Henry V's famous speech at Agincourt, where he says, "We few, we happy few, we band of brothers and sisters." I'll change Shakespeare slightly. We were 12 TDs and 4 senators, and we added a 5th senator over the course of the term. We were 16 people. 16 motivated, crazy people who achieved an enormous amount over the lifetime of the government. And the highlight for me really was working with those 15 other people who were so committed at every level, on a personal level, on a policy level, on an intellectual level, on a moral level. We were all in. We worked so hard. We achieved so much. And it makes me think, I don't know who this quote is attributed to, but the person who said, "Never doubt that a small group of motivated people can change the world. In fact, it's the only thing that ever has." And we were a small group of motivated people. The European Greens, even though this is a big gathering, in terms of percentage of the overall population, we are a small group of motivated people, but never doubt that we're the people who can change the world.
And on that note, I'd like to thank Eamon Ryan, Pauline O'Reilly, and Mark O'Cahasek for joining us here today. Do you want to stand for a photo? Yeah, okay. Okay, thanks everyone. Okay, we're just going to move along, and in my notes here I was going to emphasize that it's very important that the next session starts on time, but I think we've gone a couple of minutes over at this stage, so apologies for that. So we're just going to ask for everybody to come back into the room and be seated at, I'm just checking the time here, at 4:30 sharp. Okay, so the next session will have 3 blocks without a break, and will last until 7:30 for delegates and 6:45 for everybody else. So I'm just going to ask you all to get a snack, get your water, and anything else you might need during this break, because we're going to need your full focus for the 3 hours after the break, when the candidates for the Committee of the European Greens, candidates for the Amendments Committee, and a candidate party for EGP membership will all present themselves. So just a reminder, we're going to start again at 4:30 sharp. And we want you all sitting in your seat. And at 4:30, we're actually going to have a comedy performance. And it's a performance I've seen twice myself, so you're not going to want to miss it. So 4:30 sharp, everybody, please. Thank you.